Okay, welcome to the webinar today, where we'll be discussing the secret to successful enterprise reporting during ERP cloud migrations. My name's Nick Jewell. I'm Incorta's Senior Director of Product Marketing, and I'll be introducing our topic today. I'd also like to introduce a very special guest. Joining us from our partner Perficient is analytics industry legend, Mazen Manasseh, who's going to be talking us through the journey of modernizing Oracle BI and why Incorta makes such a difference for successful enterprise reporting when ERP systems get upgraded, but also migrated. We'll cover the pros and the cons of different migration paths to the cloud and some best practices around that journey, both for the migration itself and, of course, with what comes next. You'll hear from me again at the end of the session today, where I'll be moderating the Q&A. So once more, a reminder to get those questions in during today's presentation. So let's get underway. And Oracle modernization requires that we pay really close attention to a number of different areas in our legacy stacks. Firstly, there's the data architecture itself, where data pipelines feed an increasingly complex ecosystem of reports, dashboards, and other components, and will need to be redefined and rebuilt in order to move to a new platform. Now, this process is often fraught with difficulties due to the numerous choke points where data moves between components, alongside the general fragility of legacy platforms when it comes to making change itself. This is usually where a complex legacy architecture bleeds into an equally complex back-end technology stack that's often difficult to support, difficult to maintain, and difficult to integrate with more modern components in a wider ecosystem. And finally, modernization is about the BI content itself, addressing user needs around common standards such as self-service, while making sure that there's enough functionality available in the platform to deter users from simply dumping the data into Excel and then losing visibility of the resulting insights. And if we look at modernization purely through the lens of upgrading through the existing vendor stack, then many of our challenges with tools like OBIE don't really go away with OAC either. So first up, it's often really difficult to achieve timely insights against operational data. OBIE, for example, requires a traditional star schema in order to present data to users. And with that comes all the usual data pipelines, ETL, data engineering that's needed to load incremental changes from that source Oracle environment. Now, as you can imagine, this is a slow process, both to build, but also to run multiple times a day. And in fact, most customers resign themselves to the fact that OBIE reports are usually run on an overnight batch, and the data will be, by definition, stale when it arrives. Now, talking about star schemas, it turns out it's pretty hard to model the data, often coming from these complex business applications. With OBIE and also OAC, we have an admin tool where we typically use to design the logical, the physical, the presentation layers of our data model. And this really isn't a user-friendly tool. It's pretty complex, lots of functionality that almost gets in the way of preparing data for business use. It's really a core developer tool that requires pretty advanced training to get all those benefits. And that means whenever changes are required, there's usually some significant delay in getting those changes deployed into production. Then we hit the bottleneck of Oracle's DV product not working well with more complex models, the additional problem of incorporating multiple data sources so that insights can be built up from multiple enterprise systems. It turns out that getting the data pipelines to these systems, making sure that everything is lined up in Oracle's rapid file database, can be a real challenge. And of course, all of this is before we try and run the reports, where we're hitting a relational database with millions of records. We've traditionally required significant effort to performance tune those environments in order to deliver a fast query response. Trying to query against the structure of an ERP system where the data is often stored in hundreds of back-end tables with complex joins usually ends up resulting in frustration or failure because of suboptimal performance. And behind all of this, we're dealing with a pretty complex technology stack. There's a whole supporting cast of ETL tools, metadata management, and then the visualization layer itself. It takes an incredible amount of expertise just to maintain this fragile pipeline to deliver value to the business. So if you're nodding your head to these pain points, stay with me. I want to talk about a better way to tackle these common issues using the Incorta platform. So probably the biggest change that you see when you modernize away from tools like OBIE to modern platforms like Incorta is the time to value. When you don't need to reshape or remodel from the underlying business applications in order to provide insights for your users, you're getting analytics magnitudes faster than you were before. And that's a real differentiator. By removing the need to transform or aggregate data from the source, we get to eliminate virtually all of the traditional data pipelines and the data modeling that you've seen in legacy data architectures. And that means you get to deliver the data faster than before. We've regularly seen customers go from a single painful overnight batch load to running refreshes against their ERP platforms every 10 to 15 minutes, which completely changes the game in terms of operational insights. And it's not just the load that changes. Thanks to the way that Incorta has been developed, we've developed and created an innovative new way to query the raw operational data from these source systems, resulting in dramatic improvements in query speed. We call this direct data mapping, and it's at the heart of how we offer analytical query acceleration. And then finally, well, one of the biggest pains in business intelligence is the reliance on KPIs or high-level metrics. Now, sure, they look great in dashboards, but they don't help with follow-up questions like, why was this metric so high this month? Why did a particular sales region struggle to close their deals? These questions can only be answered by drilling down into the details, which are often unavailable when all we have to work with are summarized star schemas with data at the wrong granularity. With Incorta, all usable data from the source is available for analysis. So drilling from a top-line KPI into the raw transactional details is just a click away. The numbers will always reconcile. And that's the kind of capability that can change an analytics culture pretty much overnight when all those details are instantly accessible. Now, the other approach to modernization is to look to deploy a so-called modern data architecture. And Mazen will cover this in much more detail shortly, but there are plenty of downsides to this approach too. We easily reach a state where multiple layers get developed, each with their own sets of supporting tools and technologies. Start with data from source systems, landing in data lakes over to the left, often in raw extracts straight from those source systems, and then getting progressively refined through enterprise data warehouses and often into business data marts, those star schemas, where data gets presented to the business in simplified terms. Each layer resulting in a significant loss in data integrity, where data decisions, data engineering have stripped away upwards of 90% of the original data, and we end up with the creation of multiple copies of data in silos across the organization. So how about simplifying the whole process? What if you could take the business application data as is, ingest it, enrich it, deliver it so that users can work with all levels of that data from fundamental transactional levels upwards as quickly as possible. And again, by taking the data as is and landing it in the platform, we're making everything available for analysis, not just the final 10% of the data, the whole data set, effectively future-proofing for end users. So whatever questions get thrown at the data, everything from the underlying business applications is present at the most fundamental level without the need to step back, write new scripts to move or load data. Let's take a look at some of those capabilities that matter most to the business and put Incorta to the test versus these legacy Oracle environments. So we've talked about the ability to drill down and being able to start with a top line KPI and drill through to see every component transaction for that metric. Now in OBIE, we're generally limited to subsets without the ability to reach the raw numbers that could actually give us confidence in those metrics. We've probably all experienced the pain of OBIE taking minutes or hours or longer to render our reports. Incorta has the performance, thanks to direct data mapping, to make this process a sub-second experience. We've seen the pain of the traditional analytics cycle, where new data can take weeks or months to acquire and ingest into a traditional data warehouse, now down to minutes with Incorta. And finally, knowing that you've got accurate results after a series of complex overnight data pipelines, well, honestly, who knows? We've historically put a lot of trust into these processes, but they end up pretty opaque. With Incorta, we don't need to reshape or transform the source system, so we can get instantly reconcilable results and we get immediate confidence from our analytics. So let's see what this looks like for a real customer deployment. And here we're seeing some of the real world pains for a finance team trying to analyze their receivables data on a daily basis. Now, the legacy approach shown here on the left-hand side, running OBIE after an Informatica data pipeline using Exadata. So this is a pretty expensive stack already, shows that just opening the aging dashboard for this finance team, the top number here, takes 54 seconds, nearly a minute before we can even get working. Moving data from source system to OBIE was 70 plus minutes, running 12 times a day. And once it was there, no drill downs, no ability to search within a dashboard, and limited interactivity, with even a simple filter operation taking more than a minute to complete. Now contrast this with Incorta over on the right, which replaced this legacy stack with a platform that delivered over 96 refreshes every single day, with the data pipeline taking just 4 minutes to get from the source ERP into the dashboard, and then being fully interactive on millions of transactional records, with clicks taking around 1 second each, allowing real analysis at the speed of thought. Now, as part of the Incorta platform, we offer pre-built dashboards and business views that provide this huge head start to modernizing an existing Oracle BI environment or to enable rich reporting during a migration to the cloud. Predefined templates, predefined logic that gets you directly to the data that matters from deep within business applications like EBS or Oracle Cloud ERP. We talk about rich reporting. Here's just a flavor of what's available. So offering key metrics, sample reports, data visualizations, analytical self-service based on our deep experience of working with Oracle ERP customers. And the results, honestly, can be dramatic. Customers deploy an Incorta data application as part of their solution. They're working with all their data for accounts payable, their general ledger, inventory management, end to end, often within the same day. And let me finish up with some thoughts around that larger migration project from EBS over to Oracle ERP Cloud, which often leads to many new concerns around supporting the business with critical operational insights during or after this migration. In our experience, this migration requires a serious level of attention to detail. Data warehouses, data pipelines, reporting, all need to be rebuilt to support this new future state. Phasing a data migration might sound like the right way to go in order to mitigate the risk over this project, but it introduces its own challenges, like delivering simultaneous reporting from both environments during the migration and possibly beyond the migration. And in fact, we've seen customers start this process and still require access to the legacy system for 2 to 5 years afterwards. And there's also concerns about exactly how much data needs to be migrated or offboarded to a historical data platform. Then there's the issues of data visibility. Can you actually connect to the ERP environments via public APIs or dedicated connectors? Or are you simply reliant on expensive database backups to access that data? And even once you have the data, with all the complexity of an ERP system, can you actually make sense of the raw data in its original format? And then finally, during this whole process, it's rarely a lift and shift of what you already have. That's not the goal with this sort of digital transformation. You'll want to reevaluate how business decision makers consume the data. And this is where moving away from spreadsheet extracts towards a modern self-service model makes the most sense. And of course, for modernization projects like this, the Incorta platform offers a high-performance, easy-to-implement solution to ensure a successful delivery and a smooth migration. With Incorta, you're getting access to the fast lane. So for these kind of migrations, you're getting fresh data arriving from legacy or target environments as often as every 10 minutes. You're getting tight alignment with your modern data stack components. You're getting incredible speed from our data applications that really understand where your key data resides. And you're getting trust in the numbers, from KPIs down to transactional details. So Mazen, I'd love to hand over the webinar to you at this point so you can share your experiences of enterprise reporting during ERP cloud migrations. Mazen, over to you.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to elaborate more on the topic where Nick ended with the ERP cloud migrations and tackle the issue of reporting for ERP from a little different angle. So with that, let me just brief you a little bit about Perficient if you haven't heard who we are. So we're a publicly traded company. We do have over 7,500 colleagues globally. We do have presence in major locations across the United States, but we do have development centers in Latin America, East Asia, and Europe as well, close to $500 million in annual revenue. And the one metric that we keep talking about is our repeat business rate. We tend to partner with our customers for a longer journey, not just for the immediate project that we're working on. So our repeat business rate is about 95%. That's there. And so if you're on your journey going from eBusiness Suite to Oracle ERP Cloud, you probably have realized it's kind of a transformational program that touches all parts of the company. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of resources. It's a time-consuming effort. It takes a longer duration than other type projects. And it's normally multi-phased. So if sometimes we hear there's a big bang deployment of Oracle Cloud ERP, but typically it's a multi-phased initiative where you have your short-term goals, intermediate terms, and then longer-term goals where everything is fully cloud. But yeah, so we gotta be careful when it's staggered and there's gradual releases to see how we want to do that. And it's also an opportunity to revise current processes. Maybe you want to digitize some of the manual processes that are going on, improve some processes, implement maybe better governance around some of the workflows, but also make sure that the business have the agility to do their work in an agile manner. So it's really not just a technical improvement, but it also involves a lot of change management across the organization. Now, a common challenge in a project like this is to be able to allow the business to do integrated consolidated reporting across both eBusiness Suite, Oracle Fusion Cloud, not just towards the end of the project, but throughout the project as well, because it tends to be a longer term project that spans many months and multiple years sometimes. So what are the different paths to migration? Typically, if you're not doing a single deployment, you may be doing it by application modules. And a very common scenario is to implement the GL module where you may be revising your chart of accounts in Fusion Cloud, improving the financial close process early on, but really keeping the subledgers in where they are in on-prem and EBS for the first phase. And that's very typical So for example, you consolidated your journals, your balances, GL in cloud, but your receivables, payables, projects, procurement, and so forth, these stay on-prem for the first release. And the other way we can see it done is by organization. So especially if you're a global company where you have multiple geographies, or if you've grown through several acquisitions and those smaller entities or other entities still kind of operate in a standalone mode, you may want to choose to do it by organization. So this is just another way of doing the cloud migration. But again, it's important to kind of look at things together, not in silos, even though you're doing part of the organization first. And the third theme we see with Oracle Cloud Migration is doing it by data recency, where you limit the migration to cloud, where you don't do a full migration. And that's typical of companies that have been using EBS for a longer period of time, many years, tens of years of history, large volumes of data that are not necessarily required to be in the new system. So that's where you maybe, for example, pushing out only your open orders, keeping out everything that's closed in the e-business suite application on premise, or you may want to choose to pull over maybe 2-3 years worth of historical data to Fusion Cloud. The rest of the transactions stay where they are. But so really, whichever approach is taken, there's still the need to kind of put together a reporting solution that's able to cover both areas, the on-prem application and cloud application, to present this coherent picture of the business. And it's not just that, but it's also important to use a solution that is adaptable to the ongoing migrations and the journey throughout as people or parts of the company move to the cloud. So what are the common pitfalls that we see in this area? And these pitfalls range from a spectrum of doing nothing at all, really. Sometimes it's like a little too late when the project is already underway and someone is trying to pull together a financial report and it's partially populated or it's broken. So some people are aware of it late in the game. And on the other side of the spectrum, we see some people trying to build a fully fledged data science platform from the ground up, which is, in my mind, really adventurous to do. So going without or doing things manually, that's obviously a lot of effort to manually pull data from different systems and consolidate in reporting. And whatever work is done during that intermediate phase, it's going to be throwaway work because it's all going to be in the cloud and it's not going to be able to be reused for that purpose. But if you choose to do an interim solution, we've seen people leverage the existing on-premises technologies to pipe in the Fusion Cloud data like Discoverer or Noetics views. This may be done in limited cases, but it's not a foolproof solution because you cannot really access the Fusion data in the way that you typically access EBS data. You don't normally have database access. Things are organized structurally a little different in Fusion. Data structures are a little different, and that's for a good reason. So that's something to keep in mind if you're down the road of building an interim solution as you're migrating to cloud. That work that's a lot of effort that you're going to spend that is going to have to be wasted and reworked towards the end. So why do we need an agile analytics platform? So really is to think not just about the end game, but also what people are going to be doing throughout. So it's very important for the solution to be adaptable, accommodate the transformation, not just towards the end, but along the way. And the architecture requires, the capability to handle multi-source applications. Sometimes you have more than two, and sometimes the end goal may leave you with more than one application. I've seen cases where their HCM application had to be separate in a separate app, could be on-premise, could be cloud. All right, and this question I get a lot, like, why can't we leverage the Oracle Cloud native reporting tools. There's great reporting tools in Oracle Fusion Cloud. I'm listing some of them here: the Transactional Business Intelligence, BI Publisher, Smart View, and these are great at what they're meant to be doing. So for transactional day-to-day operational reporting, these are great tools to use. For the line manager, the functional leads, it shows the current state, what's going on as of now. For example, if you're looking at headcount, it's going to give you the current state of headcount. It's going to give you what's going on for a short-term time period, maybe weeks, maybe up to a month. But it's limited complexity and scope, so it doesn't scale when we talk about quarterly or yearly or year-over-year comparisons. It does have also limitation around self-service, what you can do from a self-service perspective. It's limited to data infusion. So if you're trying to mash up data from outside applications, say Salesforce, for example, these tools won't help. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're thinking about leveraging the built-in native tools, they will have a lot of limitations on what they can do. So if you want to do broader strategic decision-making based on your data, you want to implement a different type solution. Something that is more complex in terms of use cases, larger data volumes, especially multiple subject areas, multi-source analyses, and collaboration across different groups. These tools won't really be able to support it. And then sometimes we see people doing like data extractions to maintain their own data stores using tools that are built in. And they may get you going initially, but they're really hard to maintain, especially when you want to do like integrity of the data as you're incrementally refreshing it, keeping the data comprehensive in its entirety, and ability to scale, really. You won't be able to scale to large data volumes with these built-in tools. So that's something to keep in mind about what native tools are going to offer you, what's the gap, and how we want to approach the gap. So this is what the picture looks like from a traditional data warehouse perspective, where you have multiple platforms, really. You have the data storage environment where the data is actually stored. There's the data integration platform, which takes care of pipelining the data out of the source systems into the data store, transforming it. And then there's a separate platform for reporting for the BI layer. So it really takes different solutions, different vendors to provide those solutions as well, normally. But if we want to focus on one main thing here, we want to focus on the box that says data storage and management services, because that's where the bulk of the work is, transforming the data after it's extracted from the source system. So if we're doing Oracle EBS and Oracle SAS, we would first stage the data in its normalized manner and then transform it over to more of a report-ready data structure that is going to scale and perform properly with a relational data warehouse like this. And that's a lot of effort to do, especially if you're dealing with more than one source system. So we talked about the data integration platform, which is normally a separate tool. It takes a larger team to put this architecture together. So you got your personnel who are skilled in the data integration, transformation. Then you got a different set of skill set to handle the data modeling on the reporting platform side and building the dashboards. These are typically different teams that do that. And that's why this process is very lengthy. It's not adequate if your requirements are continuously changing. In a typical cloud migration project, data is continuously moving, the requirements are developing. Doing it this way, it's going to be a lot of effort and a lengthy process. And sometimes we get this idea of, okay, let's get away with the data integration platform altogether and connect our data model from the reporting platform directly to the source systems. Some products do that with data virtualization, it's called. It may work for limited data volumes, but again, it's not going to scale. Getting away with the data storage layer completely. It's not going to be able to handle multiple sources and cloud, especially cloud applications, because they limit access to their data storage. And sometimes there are thoughts around doing data science platforms using Python and scripting to build everything from the ground up from scratch. Build a data lake and then layer lake house on top of it using Python scripts. Not the best way to go about reporting for Oracle Cloud ERP. You can do it initially quickly, but then you're gonna end up with a lot of scripts that are very difficult to maintain. It's not something that you want to do kind of on a longer term basis with a foolproof architecture, just because of the complexity of those data structures that you get out of the ERP system. They're different from other type of data science type projects. All right, so how is the Incorta approach different? Looping back to what Nick has been presenting early on here. With the Incorta approach, if you look on the left side of the screen, we're doing direct data ingestion from the source applications, so Oracle EBS and SAS, maybe others too. And these data structures are a replica of what you have in the source system. So very quick, easy data application. There's no transformation. And then leveraging the direct data mapping from Incorta to be able to join all those hundreds of tables, thousands of joins across the different schemas. So this is why this is going to be much faster to implement, because that data integration layer that I talked about earlier, the data integration platform doesn't exist here. It's direct data mapping instead. And then we've got the business schema. And the business schema is where we start isolating the physical data from the actual users and the presentation layer. And this would be the single source of truth across all ERP systems, EBS as well as Fusion Cloud. So we see here in the business schema, each of those ERP modules may contain one, two, or more underlying or source applications. And so this is what makes it reliable for both the shorter term as well as the longer term, because as more of the EBS data moves to the cloud, the business schema is going to layer on top of either source without the end users realizing that they need to go to this place to get their EBS data and go to that place to get their cloud data. It's all presented in a one structure of business schema. And so if you look at the end-to-end solution with an Incorta approach, you're looking at a single platform that's going to handle the data storage, the data ingestion, and the presentation, data visualizations, really. We don't need to go out to third parties to store the data. It's all integrated in one platform. It's also high-performing analytics. So normally in a traditional data warehouse, as we get over couple hundred million rows, we start thinking about performance. Things get slower. We want to build aggregate tables, but there's different slices of the data that we want to aggregate against. It's a lot of manual effort to build all those aggregates and maintain them. With Incorta, we're easily able to scale up to over 100 million billions of rows and keep the data down to the transaction level without having to worry about building those aggregates to address performance issues. That's kind of a key thing to kind of plan for, not just for the initial migration, but ahead as the cloud platform gains more adoption and collects more data. So it supports the transaction level detail. There's no loss of detail, no aggregation. It's also near real time. I've seen this scheduled as frequent as hourly or even every 15 minutes to push out data from the ERP systems into the Incorta platform. Okay, so we talked about the journey, how to get to cloud, how to consolidate data from different applications. But what's equally important, I think, is what's beyond getting to cloud. And with this in mind, you want to be able to support the business with envisioning what they want to do, and actually delivering it. It's a cycle that's going to continuously happen beyond the initial implementation. And there's two things that come to mind here is support this cross-functional reporting, across multiple subject areas, multiple modules. Procure to pay is a good example of that, order to cash, many supply chain processes that balance supply and demand, inventory management. These are things that are pretty complex, and you want to be able to support this cross-functional reporting in an easy manner without having to build extra star schemas, transformations like we used to do. And the other side is to not just focus the data and analysis on what's in your ERP, but also allow integration of data from other applications, for example, Salesforce data, or even, for example, corporate performance management data for consolidated financials, plans, and forecasts. These are very typical requirements that we want to be able to tap into those other data sources. And the way Incorta kind of handles these things is with three main things I'm mentioning here, which is the pre-built Fusion apps, Fusion Data App, which accelerates the deployment of the base foundation layer. It does leverage the Oracle Cloud ERP BICC layer, which is the BI Cloud Connector. It comes with a predefined offering there to get you started with the most commonly used public view objects, they're called. So these will easily extract the most commonly used PVOs, but you have the ability to go in and add more over time. It has minimal transformation, as we've said, so you don't need to spend time changing how the data is stored. As long as you are able to ingest it and connect it to the rest of the schema, you're ready to go. And then they have the ready-to-use data apps for both EBS and Fusion and some other apps as well, so you're not starting from the ground up from scratch. I think with those three in mind, you can offer much faster cycles of delivering releases and enhancements way after go live as well. And so to wrap it up here, in conclusion, we can talk about so many different benefits of what a BI reporting solution may offer you, like security, governance, agility, self-service. But there's three main takeaways to focus on what Incorta can provide in this ERP migration journey. The first thing is a single source of truth, very important for the business to implement a solution that's going to be adaptable throughout as different pieces and modules are migrated. It's agile to handle the future acquisitions. If your company is growing and you're adding more business units, to be able to incorporate those in an agile manner and then scale to billions of transactions without having to worry about bottleneck in performance and the data pipeline. Second is the time to migrate. The project is very complex to migrate to Cloud ERP, but to be able to support it, I think Incorta offers a lot in this agile manner of reporting to continuously ingest data and be able to report of it instantly without going through a long cycle. And the accelerated data apps that's going to offer you greater time to value with the time to migrate. And then third is the seamless end user experience. As we've said, we're isolating the users from where the data is stored, how is it ingested. All that is seamless because the single source of truth is able to handle multiple source applications. So there's consistent reporting throughout, during and post-migration. And it's also going to be able to support them with their self-service needs, with its continuous envision and deliver model after go live. So those are the three key takeaways I think important to keep in mind. And with that, I come to the end of my part. Let's see, I think we're ready for questions, Nick.
Okay, so Mazen, just want to say thank you so much for a great presentation there. I think there's a lot of folks in the chat right now talking about enterprise reporting from their perspective, and I think what you've done there is put forward a bunch